The new record. You've mentioned two different sort of influences on this record. There may be others, but the two that I read most prominently, and I'm trying to figure out how to reconcile the two. Queen, it makes perfect sense. Frank Sinatra,
Right.
in some sense, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And I know you have a particular affinity and love for Frank Sinatra for all the right reasons. How does that come through on this record? How does that play in your head as you're writing these songs?
Yeah, it is. It's a difficult, I guess, correlation to make a lot of times. You hear those two artists, and they're so different from different ends of the spectrum. Sinatra hated rock and roll. He would say it all the time. Freddie Mercury was so rock and roll, so uniquely rock and roll. But both amazing frontmen and both amazingly charismatic. I think that's where I fell in love with both of them, respectively. I think I was a kid, and you're listening to holiday albums with the family. I just listened to Sinatra. I just fell in love. I couldn't even really explain it. From the first time I heard him, I was like, I want to sound like this guy. He's got swagger. Every time he sings a note, the girls are like, ah, like in the back.
Yeah.
I was like, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I idolized him. Same with Freddie Mercury, man. I just, something about the way that he performed, the way that he sang was so powerful, and the voice has always carried that kind of passion for me. Just growing up, I never considered myself a singer, but from both ends of that spectrum, they were both phenomenal singers.
Yeah, and there's certainly with Freddie Mercury and Queen, there's a theatricality, which we'll talk about that because that sort of translates to your live performance.
Sure.
We'll get to that in a minute. 'Cause
Awesome.
there's all kinds of stuff to go into. All kinds of stuff to go into there. But in terms of the title track, "Death of a Bachelor."
Right.
Now, I read you were consciously trying to write a Sinatra song.
I was.
How do you do that?
That's that's what I didn't realize until I got halfway through the process. So I had written basically from front to back "Death of a Bachelor" on piano with vocals, and then after that I was like, okay, now it's time to do the string arrangements. And then I realized I don't know how the hell to do string arrangements. So
and Nelson Riddle isn't around.
Nelson Riddle is
yeah.
And how am I gonna even compete with that kind of
Right.
genius, or Count Basie or any of them? So I just did what I do, and I had this track I'd been sitting on for a month or so, and I went back to it, and I was just like, I get to that moment when I'm writing a lot of times where I get frustrated and sometimes bored and sometimes both, where I need to just jump out and do something completely rambunctious, completely different. And so I put the vocal to a track that I had, and I was going to remix it, but it landed perfectly in the song. And I was like, there we go. All right, there's "Death of a Bachelor." So it just kind of worked out. It was very, one of those easy accidents, happy accidents.
Does the title of that track sort of indicate where you are in your head?
Yeah, I mean, "Death of a Bachelor" for me, obviously I'm married now, but it was more talking about, as an artist, I felt reborn in a sense. I didn't feel like I was writing the same stuff I used to. It was very exciting. It was scary at first. I was like, well, I don't know, is this okay? Am I okay to do this? And then from a lot of support from everybody on my team and on my side, it felt really good. Yeah. It's really cool to just jump out and do weird stuff sometimes. Yeah. I like doing that.
Well, it's one thing to do that, and it's one thing to do that in the context of having other band members. You're now essentially on your own.
It's just me.
Yeah. So
I made it.
Not that these folks mind, but it begs the question. Oftentimes creative types, artists, need feedback. It's like, I'm doing this. Does this work? Should it sound this way, that way, or the other way? And getting feedback is important. If the band members are gone, where's the feedback coming from?
Artists most of the time are narcissistic and gluttons for punishment at the same time. So it kind of goes both. You're looking for that attention, and then when someone gives you something just awfully criticizing to whatever you're doing, you get really judgmental, and then you start yelling at them and getting defensive. You're like, you suck, whatever. And then, so luckily I have people that aren't yes people. And what I mean by that is, like, if I show them something, they're going to tell me 100% honestly what they think of it. Yeah. And that's very important to me. I think it would freak me out if people were always just like, oh, this is great, this is amazing, we can do something like this, and then they figured out in marketing how it's going to work. It's like, that would suck. So I'm glad that doesn't happen.
And I should know this, but I don't. Who produced the record?
Me and my buddy Jake Sinclair.
Jake Sinclair.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So Jake Sinclair, who just produced Weezer's White Album, and former member of a Weezer cover band called Wanna Beezer, which I completely love. That's a whole different kettle of fish.
I love you. Yeah, that's amazing.
It's amazing. But so what did Jake bring to the process that maybe you might not have done on your own?
Jake is a unique character. Jake is a big brother in terms of dynamic, like how we work together. So I'm the youngest of 5, so it works out really well. I'm always looking for attention, and he's always looking to give me attention. So it's great. But at the same time, I mentioned the glutton of punishment, and I don't know why I keep going back to him because he is so harsh, and it's really great because we'll be, in the studio, and I'll show him, and hey, I got this, thing, and I'll, just be a little henpecked. Yeah, whatever you think of it, man. I don't really know. And then he'll just be like, yeah, that's terrible. So you got anything else? I'm just like, no. So it gets awkward sometimes, but I feel like that's so necessary to push yourself and do something completely different. At least for me.
So he basically he's willing to come in, and you're willing to accept him kicking you in your ass.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the best ass kicking I could ask for. It's great.
Did he? Because I had this conversation with Rivers.
Yeah.
About the Weezer record. There was very much a push-pull there. Rivers had an idea of where he wanted to go with the music. Jake had a very specific idea of kind of making it a classic Weezer record. And I'm wondering if there was that same sort of push-pull with you and Jake in making this record.
Yeah, some of the time. Like, luckily, Jake was on board with most of the stuff I would mention. But on this album, he wasn't listening to a lot of hip hop, so I was like, dude, you got to listen to all these albums. And I gave him like 10 albums, like from Kendrick to Dr. Dre to Wu-Tang to, De La Soul. You got to listen to all these albums because I'm listening to all of these all the time. And this is what's going to influence like how all this other stuff sounds. So he was like, okay, I'll check it out, whatever, dude. And then he listens to it, and he's like, wow, there's some really cool stuff in there. So luckily, if I was like, I go in the studio, he's like, how you feeling today, man? I'm writing a Sinatra song. Okay. And then he'll just like jump on board. He's like, well, luckily with him, it was like, let's run full force into this idea. And if it bombs, we bomb, whatever. But at least we tried,
Are you interested in taking, if you're listening to Kendrick Lamar and Wu-Tang and De La Soul, and you've got this Frank thing going on over here, are you interested in finding out where the intersection is between those two?
Yeah, I think at times we're like, I don't pursue it. Sometimes you'll hit those, epiphanies or realizations where you're like, oh, that's kind of similar, But a lot of times the hip-hop world, like with Tribe Called Quest, they were always sampling jazz albums. So it wasn't necessarily they were just ripping old other hip-hop or African soul, punk, or whatever. It was all jazz albums, and that was really cool. And I think that's a through line right there. That's pretty cool to flip it back on its ear and be like, oh, we turned this thing into like an urban story telling, Cool.
I think you said about the Death of a Bachelor track that it was very much the result of a happy accident.
Yeah, exactly.
Which begs a larger question about embracing that. Some artists don't do that in the studio. They don't embrace kind of the happy accidents. Clearly, you do.
Yeah, I think it works sometimes, and that time it really did. I was really impressed with how that had laid itself out before me. That was amazing. But that was a happy accident. It was just I couldn't have done that on my own. It had to be some mistake that just made me so surprised pleasantly. And other times I'll have an idea in my head and we have to pursue it till death or else I will be so unhappy with this song. Yeah.
So I'm listening to the record and the song that connected the record to Sinatra for me is Impossible Year.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
and I'm listening to this song, I'm listening to your voice, and then I'm listening to past Panic at the Disco music. And I'm saying to myself, where the hell did this voice come from? Where did that? Did you know you kind of had that in you the whole time?
In terms of voice?
And yeah, in terms of your vocal delivery, particularly on Impossible Year.
Oh,
that
man.
just strikes me as a level beyond.
Thank you. I have to say that a lot of the credit goes to Jake Sinclair because he's there pushing me. I mean, listen. I'll usually sit there and just be like, I can't do it. I can't. It's too high. I'm not going to sing that. It's so frustrating, dude. I have to sing this live, Jake. Like, I can't just do it on an album and be the Beatles and say, we're not touring ever again. It's like, I can't do that. I have to.
Hard to make a living that way now.
It's hard to make a living now, yeah. No one's buying albums. Yeah, so it's pretty amazing, like, to think that he had to push me in that sense where I would have just given up. But he was like, no, come on. That's where his big brotherness comes in. It's great.
Yeah. Well, and that sort of that nice segue into the discussion about the live performance, because one of the questions I generally will ask artists is, as you are working in the studio, working out songs, laboring over them, figuring out how they sound or whatever, how much of the live performance is in your head as you're working on these tracks?
So it's gotten better over the years. I'd say on this album, the thought of tour didn't happen until later, like when the song was pretty much done. Because then I would listen back to it and I could appreciate it instead of just constantly having to work on it. When Jake would give me his opinion of, oh, I think it's getting close to done, I'd be like, all right, well, I have 8 more ideas, so let's melt those away before we make a decision. And then once it's finished and I can sit back and enjoy it for the first time, then I start thinking, oh, this would be so fun. We'll pause right here. We'll do a dramatic moment, because I like to figure those things out. It makes it more fun for the theatricality, drama in the live show.
Yeah. You've talked about just dropping back to Impossible Year. You like to end albums on a bittersweet note.
Yeah,
which
why the hell is that?
Yeah, which I find most artists want to go out with, something that people will walk away going, oh my God, gobsmacked. But why bittersweet?
That's kind of unanswerable for me. I don't know. I tend to do that. It's like, maybe that's why I loved the Beatles so much when I was a kid, and I still worship them to this day. It's because they had that, got to admit it's getting better all the time. Can't get much worse. So they had like Paul McCartney being all light and like, this is so great, guys, we're having a good time. And John's like, can't get any worse. You know what I mean? So it's like, you got to have that push and pull. I love the juxtaposition of that. I love that contrast in songs. It's like The Cure's Love Song. It's like this incredibly sad sounding melody, but all these lyrics are so poetic, like, however far away, I'll always love you. That's really where it came from. It's just like wanting to do something like that, so sadly happy and beautiful. It's weird.
I'm getting the feeling these folks like that. I'm
Okay.
just
Yay!
shameless invoking the audience moment.
He just forgot his question.
Yeah,
so he's
yeah.
Just, no, it's good.
So the album actually opens with the track that you wrote with Rivers, Victorious. And I'm wondering, so Rivers is a completely unique
Absolutely.
songwriter, unique presence in rock
Individual,
music.
yeah.
And what did he bring to the collaboration? How did that collaboration work for you?
It was very weird because in the best way possible. No, in the best way possible. The first time I ever met Rivers was about 8 years ago. Yeah, about 8 years ago. And I was, the band is kind of just on its end, and I was wanting to get out and just write with more other people. And so it was brought to me like, hey, Rivers is doing co-writes and stuff. I was like, what is a co-write? That sounds cool. So I jumped into this thing. I was like, this seems really awkward. I show up at his house. I'm like shaking. I was like, this is Brendan. And I was supposed to write with you. And he was the nicest guy. Let me in. He does the Japanese thing, took the shoes off, walked through the house. He's like, this is my map of the world in 1700s. And it's like hanging on his wall. And I'm like, that's an amazing mural. He's just, and then he just kind of like nods at stuff. And then it was really so surreal. Then we started writing. And halfway through writing a song with him for the first time, I had to fanboy out. I was like, listen, dude, I'm not going to stop shaking or being anxious until I can tell you that the Blue Album and Pinkerton changed my life. I learned how to play guitar, drums, sing, harmonies, all that stuff to your music, so thank you. He was just like, okay, cool. I was like, cool, now we're done. I was like, let's keep writing. Let's write the song again. Forget that I said it. He's like, no, let's stay in this. I'm like, oh, no. This is getting so weird. I shouldn't have said anything, but he was really cool about it. Then cut to this album. Jake and I are working, but Jake is also spending half of his time writing stuff with Weezer. They're not necessarily recording. It's part-time. So while I'm finishing up Victorious, I got to this part kind of towards a chorus that I had this sense, and I built up everything else around it, and I was missing this one melody. I was getting so frustrated. I hit a wall, and that's when co-writes really help. That's when someone else's opinion comes into play. And Jake just had the idea to email him. He was like, hey, man, here's this idea. He was actually on the phone. He was like, hey, man, I'm going to email you this clip, because he was asking, what is that song you guys are working on? That's really cool. And then he emailed him a thing, and then 5 minutes later, Rivers emailed back with a melody and words. And I was like, dude, you just saved my life. Thank you. That is incredible. And now I can say I have like a Rivers Cuomo part on my album. That's amazing.
There you go. Did he happen to show you, because we talked about this, he keeps these incredible sort of logs and spreadsheets of song titles and first lines from songs arranged
Yes.
by syllables
Syllables and
Yeah.
BPMs
Yeah.
and
Yes.
chords and
Yeah.
and yes, major minor key, and it's really cool. It's really well thought out, but it's so Rivers. It's so Rivers. Like I couldn't do that. I bounce around too much. I would feel like it's homework, but he loves homework. Rivers loves homework.
Yeah.
The dude's a Harvard grad. Like he's got guys. He's so smart. All right, so he I'm just like he's like super smart and stuff. So like he does so many unique things that I really admire and respect, but I could never do. You know, it's
Yeah.
such an individualistic
Yeah.
thing to do.
Yeah, it's a really interesting and in
Yeah.
some ways analytical approach
Absolutely.
to songwriting.
Right.
But it comes out in, the best sort of emotional way.
Right. His whole thing is I was creative right now, and I have that idea, and I'll save it for when I need it.
Yeah.
He's just got an arsenal of stuff, just
Yeah.
ammunition.
Yeah, it's like every time you have an idea, write it down.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure most of us are capable of.
Yeah.
You've talked about this record, and you've said that this is not a record that you could have made a couple of years ago. And I'm wondering why. What's changed in a couple of years?
There's a couple things that have changed for me over the years. One of which is obviously when I'm writing alone and I'm basically dictating however I want it to go. I get to delegate to other people how I want it to work, just because it's my project now. So that makes it easier. Before it's like you have an idea, you show your 3 other buddies. We start putting a hand and foot into stuff and be like, okay, this is kind of cool, and that's great, and it ebbs and flows, and then you get a really unique thing that only these 4 people could make, and that's really awesome. And this time around, it was like I don't know if I would have allowed myself to do that back then. So now I'm able to try to put in sonic influences where I didn't really do that before. On the first album that Panic ever did, we were listening to a lot of Keane and Third Eye Blind, Oasis. It was like a lot of 90s pop, and our record sounds nothing like that. So it was just using that as like writing styles, but not trying to copy it sonically. And now I really want to copy it sonically because I just even more now appreciate and love the artists that I do for different reasons, mostly sonic reasons.
Speaking of the Sonics, you recorded this mostly at home.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, and many artists have talked about kind of the advantages.
They're hinting at something else.
Yeah,
but
yeah. The advantages of working at home and
Absolutely.
recording at home. But also, whenever I hear someone say, "Oh yeah, I did this at home," I think of the very famous Sting quote about making an album, where he said, "You don't necessarily so much finish an album as you just give up." So
Wow.
so
Thanks, Gordon, or Sting, whatever.
Which when you're at home, I can see like you're chasing every opportunity. Why? Because you're not on the clock. You can go on forever.
It's dangerous not having limitations sometimes. It's dangerous not having a regulated schedule. But it's also fun as hell because I could do whatever. I felt so free. In a literal sense and a metaphorical sense, I really was. I mean, I recorded half the stuff naked because it was at my house. So I would wake up, have my coffee.
Simmer down.
Not naked now. No, but I would wake up, have my coffee, run into the studio, do my thing, and sometimes, you got clothes on, got clothes off, but it worked out, and that was, I don't know, it was like very comfortable setting. I didn't really, unless Jake would come over, then I'm obviously naked. So it was just like, I don't know. No. But it was different. It was just different. I'd never done that before. I'd been waiting, over a decade to actually have a studio in my home.
Yeah.
I'd never really had that before, so it was so cool, so unique.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned, you've been doing this for over a decade. It's, going on more than 12 years since you formed the band. And I'm wondering, how have you evolved as an artist? How have you changed?
It's tough to answer because I feel the same. Like I still feel 16 up here. I still laugh at the same immature stuff. I don't know. It's like I feel the music has changed drastically, but I don't know if it was a conscious thing. I think it just had to happen over time. As you go through certain things, meet people. Because I'm a believer in that. I'm a believer in that butterfly effect. To a certain degree, is that everybody I come in contact with right now, talking with you, looking at you beautiful people, this is going to somehow influence me to do something I never would have if this situation didn't occur. So I like to think about that, and I like to use that as like a catalyst for a lot of creative stuff.
Yeah. You've said that you wanted fans to be surprised by this record.
Always.
What surprised you about it?
I'm always surprised by how it's received because I never think about it when the time comes to like have it out. it's usually like a month before it's released. It starts to set in, like, oh crap, dude, it's coming out.
I mean, no pun intended,
Yeah.
but is that panic
I
time?
really do panic.
Yeah,
I have panic
yeah.
attacks, and I just like start freaking out. I start calling people. Are you sure it's good? Oh god! I start freaking out. Start freaking out a lot of times. But that's good because I'm very fortunate in the sense that I don't think about it when I'm writing. And I don't know how that doesn't creep in there because I think it would be such a detriment. Be like, well, I have to do this because this is hot right now. People will like this, right?
Well, there is something to be said for, and many artists have talked about this, about not overthinking. I mean, it's very easy, especially when you're locked at home in your own studio, to overthink what you're doing.
Yeah. Man, like, I've always, the way I put it, I guess the easiest way is I'm a very emotional person. So overthinking for me maybe isn't overthinking, it's overfeeling. I probably just get a little too anxious a lot of times, and that'll turn into thoughts. But a lot of times, it's hard for me to overthink, man. I don't think a lot. But I feel a lot, so so I try to use that as a catalyst, too.
Do you like to work fast? Do you like to work fast?
You know what? What's funny is I worked with a couple different producers that gave me a sense of how you could work, different ways of working. For instance, here's two guys. Butch Walker, who's phenomenal. John Feldman, who's phenomenal, too.
Love him.
Both amazing producers.
Yeah.
So different. Like, the first time I jumped in with John Feldman was for the third album that Panic did, and I remember meeting him just being like, you know, gushing over, just, oh, dude, you're Goldfinger, you're writing all this stuff for all my other favorite bands.
He
You're
just did the Blink record, didn't he?
He did the new Blink record, which is great. He's just so talented. He can kind of jump in any venue, and he's such a great guy. But we worked like 16-hour days, and he's just constantly drinking coffee and just like, yeah, let's do this, man. You just ready to write? Go, right, go, right. And we're just like bouncing around. I was like, okay. And it kind of was good. It kicked my ass back in gear because I was really at a down moment, you know, where I was just like, what do I do? And everybody's like, just show up, man. I'm like, all right, you know, whatever. And luckily that really got me in that mindset of like, I love working. So I did that for a while. And then I met Butch Walker, and we would work like 10 minutes and they'd be like, cool, hey, do you want a beer? You want to like go get some food? I'm just like, I like this way too, so I think I'm going to keep this way more.
By the way, quick story about Butch Walker. The only artist we've ever had here at the Grammy Museum showed up on his motorcycle, literally pulled it up in front with his posse, you know, with his
like
motorcycle
rolling 20
guys.
deep, VVMC.
Yeah, it was
Work.
fantastic.
Yeah. Dude, he is awesome. He is such a rock star.
Yeah.
But the nicest dude.
Yeah.
He's like a Dave Grohl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
That's
worked
awesome.
with Dave Grohl yet?
Oh, no, I've met him twice. It's so nice. I almost cried
Waiting
when I
to
met
do
him.
that?
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would love to work with him.
Yeah. So I have to ask you about the track Hallelujah.
Awesome.
Now you grew up in a very religious family. You've talked about this.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily religious, you know, at this point in your life, but you acknowledge that religion has played an important part.
Absolutely.
In your growing up. But I find it interesting that you refer to your fans as sinners.
Yeah. Yeah.
And clearly they knew that.
That's awesome.
So what does sinner mean in that context?
For me, it was always, I was always told, basically the thing I heard the most when I was a kid was like, you can't do that. Nope, get back over. Brendan, get back over here now. It was always like, you can't be doing whatever you're doing right now. Whatever you're doing is going to cause trouble. It's going to give me a brain aneurysm. I'm going to lose my mind. My parents were just like running around. I feel so bad for my mom. I still give her a check every month just to say sorry. But it's like, I'm sorry you had to raise me, Mom. You're the best. But it was really crazy. And for me, that's just really what it became. It's like, do what people tell you really not to do, because that's how you're going to become an individual. It's really how you discover stuff. So I just wanted to learn to embrace that. It's not like a sinner and just be a jerk and harm people, because that's terrible. You know? With some good sense, it's good to be a sinner. That's what I think.
Yeah. There's no track on the record, L.A. Devotee.
Yeah.
Which.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, as we sit here now in Los Angeles, it's your adopted home. This is very much an homage to where you have settled. What is it about Los Angeles that inspires you?
Well, when I was growing up in Vegas, it was always a place that was in the back of my mind. All the bands I loved from around LA, you know, a lot of hip hop, all that stuff. It was just things that I wanted to do. I just fell in love with it. I always wanted to surf. Skating was big here. It was like all the things I loved as a kid, and I still do. So for me, it just became a place that seemed conducive for creativity and artists. Because every time I would come here before I moved here, it felt like home. It was like, wow, I'm meeting a lot of people who are just as neurotic as me. This is awesome.
Good times.
Yeah, this is great. We can share our neuroses together. Hey man, what freaks you out? You know, it's like, oh, me too. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. You know, I like that we can share that back and forth. Yeah, it just felt really comfortable. I feel like I can go more places.
At the end of the track, there's a little crackle on the end of the track that, you know, very reminiscent for those of us who are old enough to remember actually playing vinyl over and over again.
I remember.
Is that your you know, kind of, you know, wave to the way it was?
I've done it a few times on albums because that's one of the most soothing sounds to me. When I can literally lay on the ground, I'll put a vinyl on, and then once the like first 5 songs, side 1, kick off, and I'll sit there for like another 20 minutes and just like it going around. It's just like white noise. There's something, you know, up here that just like makes sense. I can sit there, meditate. It's so soothing. So for me, that's like, we have the bittersweet ending, but we go off on this crackle. You know, we've got all that.
Yeah. So you seem parties.
Yes.
Heading of the next segment of this discussion,
Oh, God.
parties seem to play a role in some way or another in many of your songs.
Yes.
In fact, if you look at the cover of this record, you seem to be, not passing judgment here, passed out
Yes. Yeah.
on the roof of some unknown building.
Right.
What is it about parties that make good fodder for songwriting?
It depends on the party, first off, but there's always you know, a good mix of people. That's usually the case. There's usually a good mix of people. So I think as I got older, I realized, you know, I don't ever have to really stop partying, but you get to know yourself better and what you like. So for me, it was, oh, now I know exactly how to party, who I want to invite, what animals are and are not allowed, what you know, party favors you can have. So there's certain things that you learn over time, and I always thought it was just going to die off, like I'll just, you know, like 30 to me when I was 18, it was like, I'm so old, you know. I'm approaching it really quickly, so it's weird.
Easy now, very easy now.
Bro, my dad's 68, bro. You can't skip me. So it's really crazy to think that, like, yeah, he's old. So it's crazy to think that back then, bro. We're all going to live to be 250. You guys know about the singularity? No, all right, that's the next conversation. So it's going to be really crazy to think that, you know, even 10 years from now, 12 years from now, what I'm going to think, it's going to be so different. But that's so exciting. I love that. And that's part of the mentality you have to have when you're going to go into a party. Just like, I wonder what's going to happen. I'm excited to see what happens. And that's, yeah, tons of ammunition for lyrics.
And I want to talk about kind of where you think you're going in a minute. But so I talked in the open that you've got sort of generations of fans now. You know, you started long enough ago that there is kind of a second generation of fans coming to your shows and listening to your music. And I'm wondering if there's a set of expectations, or if it's hard to balance those expectations for those who have been with you all along and those who may be coming new to what you're doing now. As you're writing songs, performing, are you thinking about kind of both groups and how you balance that?
I don't when I'm writing. I don't think about really anything other than what do I want this song to be? How do I accomplish that? I'm really just focused on that whole process, but it is daunting and in the best way possible when I'm playing a show. And I'll look out, I'll see familiar faces, we'll have meet and greets, I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that. We have like inside jokes now, that's great. But then newer fans, older fans, it's amazing to me how it's gotten to this point. Because I never saw it being that. I don't know what I expected. I don't know if I did expect much. I think when the band first started, it was like, oh, we're going to tour in a van for 10 years, and we'll just play a bunch of dingy dives. It's going to be awesome. You know, we were so prepared for that because we were so bad live. And then it just ended up like, everybody's like, hey, you guys have to do this tour now. And we're like, oh, okay. But it's really just like a huge blessing. I can't even, it's hard to put it into words because it's daunting. I get up there and I see just everybody, all of you, and I kind of lose it. I'm just like, oh, man, this is really cool. So it's really cool.
Well, I mean, you have said, I didn't, I mean, here's the quote, I didn't think I would end up where I am.
True.
So where did you think you would end up?
Oh, man. I don't know if I thought about it a lot. I think, yeah, I fantasized when I was a kid, you know, stand in front of my mirror with the guitar on and lip sync to all my favorite bands and stuff. I still do that, but It was different then. I think it was like a less jaded sense. It was just like, oh no, I'll never be this. No, it's just like really weird to think about that, because now with everything that's happened, it's hard to put it into a real solid light. Like here's an example. We just did the tour with Weezer, and it's hard to let it sink in. It's like every time I see them, I'm like, oh yeah, we toured. Dude, you're Weezer. Wait, I know you, but we're friends. But like, I idolize you, man. It's really weird. It's like a weird boundary. There's like weird crossover lines that happen, friends and idols, and it's really strange. But it's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
It's hard to describe.
Yeah. So I mentioned that I wanted to talk to you about live show and your thoughts. And here is maybe the best quote of yours that I've read to this point. You said you have to bring something clinically insane to the live show. Okay, so why is that insanity so important to you?
'Cause I'm insane. I think it's tough to pull something off in the artist world if you're not a little bit out there. Because I was always told that I was crazy. My teachers would always be like, what do you feed your child? It's too much sugar. He's crazy. I wasn't really allowed to have sugar as a kid. I was just really hyperactive. So it's like, certain people put off a certain vibe. And for me, all my ideas just kind of flood through. It comes out so easily, like a sneeze. I'll just be like, I want to light myself on fire for tour. And then I have to have people come in and be like, okay, so this is Jeremy. He's our lawyer. He says that you can't do that. We can't. There's no insurance policy that they'll take out on you. So if something bad happens, it's over. And we're just like, okay. Well, can I like shoot myself out of a cannon? And they're just like, dude, you need to find a middle ground. You're like losing your mind. I'm like, no, dude, this is gonna be awesome. Let me like lay on a bed of nails, but like one nail. And they're like, that's stupid. So it's just like whatever. I just say crazy stuff, and then I wait for people to say like, that's probably not a good idea.
Why is that stuff attractive to you? Is it more about is it more about like kind of shocking the audience in a certain sense, grabbing their attention, bringing more attention to the music?
I'm gonna be totally honest. It's totally selfish. I wanna experience it. I wanna see what that would be like. Like, how would that feel? How much of a crazy adrenaline rush to be on stage singing like I'm set myself on fire and I go up in flames. I would just be like, yeah! It would be so empowering, dude. I feel like it would be amazing. I don't know, but that's a selfish thing. I feel a lot of the choices I make are very selfish. I just want to.
Thank you very much. Good night.
All right, thank you guys. I want to experience it. That's really where it comes from. I'm curious. I don't know.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. You've said your ability to go out and play shows is a blessing.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you look at the process of recording as the means to get to that blessing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the medium in which I get to tour, why I get to when people hear it. It's the way in which fans will support, and that's what's given me the biggest push ever emotionally. Yeah, without making an album, I would just be doing covers. Like I would just be playing other people's songs on the road. I'm not opposed to that. I love doing that actually, but man, it's so different when you're singing a song that you've written that's so close to you. The first time, I remember the first album, I was terrified. And half of it was somebody else's lyrics. So I was just like, let's see what happens. I don't know what the crap is going to be like, But knowing how close it was to my buddy Ryan, it's like saying that stuff to people and having them sing it back to you, you're just like, whoa, this is heavy. But it takes on a new meaning. And now, with everything that I've done and singing something back and having people sing it back to me, completely changes the meaning. It's in the best way.
Yeah.
It's so cool because then I can kind of release it and be like, now it's not mine anymore. It's kind of everybody's. I don't really own this anymore. It's great. So let's all kind of glom on and see how we feel about this.
And it's fascinatingly ironic that you got signed to a record deal before you ever actually played a live show.
How in the hell? I don't know. Could you? Does that happen? It probably happens today. I don't know.
Not often.
Yeah, I don't know. That was really bizarre.
Or at least without a YouTube video.
I have to blame it on Pete's stupidity at the time because he was just he was like, screw it, first band, whatever, dude. I don't care. I'll sign you guys in.
So
that was the vibe back then. Not anymore. He's a dad. Come on.
So. Fair warning, we're going to ask for a question or two from the house here in just
Awesome.
in a minute. Much has been made early on about Pete Wentz and his support for Panic at the Disco when you guys started. And I'm wondering for you, how important is it to pay it forward to another young artist? And have you done that?
Yeah, I absolutely think it's crucial. Because without Pete, we would have never had our foot in the door. He got us this opportunity in the start to tour and just build something creative. There's something we had really been passionate about that we really strive to do. He gave us that opportunity.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of times, like the last time I had something, I got a CD from fans in Amsterdam, and I really enjoyed it. I was like, wow, this is really cool. I think it's unique. But I hear it in a different way too. Well, I'll hear it sometimes like a producer will. I'll be like, oh, I need to get them with this person. So that's kind of an A&R thing, I guess. You go, oh, I think that this would be a really great matchup. And then you email somebody, say, hey, what do you think about this? Oh, that's cool. And that's all really it takes, a couple emails, And that's if that's all the work it is, I'll totally do that. That's awesome.
Right. We talked about Sinatra and Queen, and I'm wondering what other artists for you, particularly perhaps those you heard when you were growing up, continue to have kind of influence in your mind as you're writing and performing?
I think it's going to be funny to people what it was and what it still is. But it was, so I'm the youngest of 5 kids, so I would listen to whatever my siblings would and my parents would. So it was, my brothers would listen to Pearl Jam and Sublime, and then they would also listen to Wu-Tang and Tribe Called Quest. And my sisters would listen to The Smiths, The Cure, Elvis Presley. So it was kind of all over the place. It was like everywhere. But I got a lot of amazing artists because of my siblings. And I was never one of those kids that thought it was uncool to listen to what your parents were listening to. I don't know why. I think it's pretty awesome. And they listened to all kinds of stuff. My dad was really into classic rock, CCR and Cream. I don't
That's
know.
all
There's just
good.
So many,
Yeah.
many artists.
Yeah.
My mom was, Phil Collins, Carly Simon, Journey, John Cicada. I don't know if you guys know who that is.
Oh, hold on. Time out. John Cicada.
Absolutely, John Cicada. Are you kidding me? Come on, man.
I mean, nice guy. I met him once, but,
Yeah. Oh, man, I love it. I'm a sucker for that. A lot of that stuff, like 80s pop, 90s pop.
But here's one that I read that I'm not sure I would connect you with, and this is an artist who has been identified by other young artists as being heavily influential. Imogen Heap.
Oh my goodness, Imogen Heap. I remember the first time I heard Frou Frou, that album, just Let It Go, all that. I was like, oh my goodness, this is the most this is a game changer. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And then when Hide and Seek came out, I think I got really frustrated, but I fell in love with the song. But I was like so down for like a week. I listened to it and I just would like cry because I'd be like, I'll never write anything this good. This is like so innovative.
Yeah.
No one's done anything
Yeah.
like this. It's so its own thing. No one will ever be her. And I got to write with her. I got to meet with her.
Really?
And it blew my mind. She was the nicest person ever.
What did you take away from that? What'd you learn from that?
She is one of the kindest souls ever, but she's so unique. And I gained a confidence because she was the first person I did a co-write with. It was before John Feldman, before Rivers. But she was the very first. And the first one, fly to London, write with this person that you've never met that you idolize. That won't be weird. I flew home like a day early because I was having a breakdown. That was fun. But yeah, that happened. So she ended up being the nicest person and kind of building my confidence. She was like, yeah.
Huh.
I watched her and just observing the way that she didn't care about anyone else's opinion really was the way I wanted to start songs. And that kind of helped me start my songs.
So I've read where you said you don't think you've created your opus yet. What do you think that's coming? Do you have a sense of that, or is that something that's just forever one step away?
I think it's forever one step away. That's the sense I'm starting to get. I think I had the illusion that it would have been that. I dreamed that, one day I'll hit that mark and I'll write my masterpiece and then I can finally let myself go, I'll be 98 years old on my deathbed and I'll just be, that was it. And then just like, I'm gone. So I don't know if that realization will ever come. I think that's, the older I get, I'm going, But I don't know if I want that. I don't know if I want that satisfaction. I want to always be striving for the opus.
Yeah. Well,
it's a paradox.
Here's all I can tell you. We are so happy you came down and spent a little time with us.
Thank
you. Fantastic.
For Scott, dude. Thank you.
More important, we want to hear you play and sing. Panic at the Disco. Come on.